Melinda with Walpole here. Today's webinar, our Sage 100 training, will be covering paperless Office. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We won't be interactive during this training, but if you do have a question, please send it in the chat and we will try to address it at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded and a copy of the on-demand webinar will be sent to you if you're registered. Please send me a message in the chat if you're not registered with your email address. Cole Straub will be our presenter today to show us some tips and tricks of paperless Office. So Cole, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Melinda. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we covered during our sort of free webinar run this week is the paperless Office function that's built into Sage 100. So when I say paperless Office, it's sort of the whole aspect of not having to print anything in the real world. Obviously, we like that from a cost-saving standpoint of ink and printer usage. We very much like that from an environmental standpoint. And in the current situation, we very, very much like that in regards to COVID. So no more people at the office having to come in to handle paper, stamp envelopes, things like that to send out invoicing. I'll walk you through kind of how the process works, some of the major setups, what it can and can't do, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so first and foremost, paperless Office needs to be enabled in your company, and it can be company by company, and that's just simply coming to paperless Office, set up paperless Office options, and here's where I can tell it what aspect of paperless Office I want to do. So maybe I just want the journals and registers, and I don't care about forms or reports. Now, when I say forms and reports, that would be invoicing, checks, purchase orders, payroll checks, things like that. Journals and registers would truly be what you think of it as, or what you should be familiar with it as. Invoice register, daily sales reports and updates, daily receipt register. So the first function of paperless Office is, where do we store these things? If you have paperless Office set up in your system and you have it set to trigger automatically, every time I print a register, it actually stores a copy in a very specified folder that you can determine on your server or wherever computer you'd actually like, as long as the Sage has access to it. So we don't have to worry about, oh, I forgot to print that general ledger register. I didn't forget my daily transaction register. Oh, the daily transaction register I physically printed, the printer was out of ink, it's gone now, and I said yes to update because I didn't have a chance to check it before. It will actually store a copy on your specified location. So first of all, which do we accept PDF storage of and electronic delivery of? For things that I might print multiple times of the same thing before finalizing or updating, do I keep just the last copy or do I keep all copies? Checkmarked is the last only. Uncheckmarked means give me one of everything, whether it's updated or not. If they printed it, I want a copy of it. And these are PDFs, so they're relatively small in size file-wise, so you won't necessarily eat through a large storage capacity anytime soon. And then this bottom window is really just about on viewer access. So when I look at the viewers, which I'll show you in just a moment, which loads automatically or which do I want to have to select first to load? By enabling these, I have essentially engaged in paperless Office. With your workstation install for any modern version of the software, it comes with, you may have seen the Sage 100 PDF converter. And that is the iMini driver that's used by Sage to piggyback and create these PDFs for you. All right. So when I set my options up, there are several things to consider here. Journal and register maintenance is where I want to save particular things. I might want it all in one folder, or I might want it separated into several different subfolders. For the sake of speed, I've set one up, and it's just literally one folder for everything. All companies, all modules, all documents, pop them in here. I can go by all modules, all companies, but just the sales order stuff. And in particular, I really want to know about the daily sales report update, because again, this is registers only, and where do I want to put that, which directory? And do I want to have it prompt me to create a PDF? Well, if I'm going to set this up, realistically, I'm probably going to want it to always make one and not interrupt me, just make it every time I print something. So we set up our journals and registers. We do the same for period end reports. So this would be in your period end processing. You've selected in period end reporting, I always want to generate these 4 reports every time I do period end processing. And this just gives you the added sense of security that when I print my period end reports, it's going to actually print me a physical copy PDF on my file server somewhere or on my Sage server somewhere, then I can always refer to that PDF document in case I actually didn't keep a copy of it or lost it, or it's been handed across to several different staff. Same process. Which company code? All are one. What module? And then what PDF directory? And yes to trigger the process too. I'll say no to this. Now, report maintenance. This is where we can get into things like, same thing, I can do all in all, or I could do something like, well, I'm working primarily in my general ledger, and then which report? Is this my audit report? Is this a budget and history report? Anytime I select, I can go individually or the all-encompassing. When someone prints this report, again, where do I store it? And this time, for certain things, do I need a password to it? You may want to encrypt that for just extra security to prevent people from looking at the files or reports if it's that kind of a nature. And we'll come into that a little bit later with when I touch on the payroll stuff. And then form maintenance. This is the important one, especially as we talk about COVID and electronic distribution. So not only is this where I store it, but this is, can I electronically deliver it? And that is first and foremost required if you want to be able to email anything. So I said, yep, give me everything, let anything be emailed because I want it that way. Enable electronic delivery is a must. What's the from email address? Now this will come into play when I talk about the email setup in just a few minutes, but I want you to pay attention that when I say this. So this from email address is exactly who it's going to send from when we send these particular documents. So I could certainly specify for all companies when it's a sales order and when it's on any sales order document that this is coming from, sales at Walpole CPA. So I can define who it's technically sent from, but there is another end to that when we talk about the setup. So I'll refer back to this, but this is what I'm going to reference when I say the alias identity when we send that. And then same thing, where do we want to store it? Do we store it one place? And then override passwords. So I'll go back to the all. Now, one of the things we can send is a check. We can send a PDF copy of the check. Hey, this is the check we just cut you. Don't worry, your payment's on the way when we send that to vendors. Same thing for electronic remittance advice. If you generate ACH files out of Sage using the PyConnect desktop, or even the manual version of generating an ACH file to then upload to your bank, you will still print electronic remittance to a vendor, and that can be sent electronically as well. And then payroll and direct deposit stubs. For those that do payroll in Sage 100, you can actually send the direct deposit stub and the payroll check if you wanted as a copy to the employee. And then do we send it during the register? Yes, so only when it's printed and updated. That way we don't send it to them, accidentally have to go back and change something and then have to resend them something. So only when the update works and is successful, it will send it. And then do I print this if I don't have an employee? So one of my employees doesn't have an email address, I want it to print a stub automatically, even if I say email everything. And then we can either generate passwords for everybody, or we can say your social security number as seen in employee maintenance is the password for when I send you your direct stubs to look at them. Obviously, there's a lot of personal and identifiable information in those stubs and things like that. So it will be password protected when generated automatically in Sage. Okay, and then last but not least on the setups, the boilerplate. When I send something, I want you to say, hey, attached is this document, dated this document date, and we can use the mail merge fields here for things like that. So for sales order, I set one up, dear at customer name. Your order document, which would be sales order number, is on the way. Hey, thanks for shopping with us. Your, again, order number would be this date, and it's on its way. So you can set up these with little insert merge fields, and you can kind of build a little bit of boilerplate to every time you send it, here's the canned email message that's going to go out with it. When we set and store these documents, we also have access in the system to look at them without having to drill down to the PDF and figure out the nomenclature because they're not named readily for the files. They're named based upon what's useful to Paperless Office. So we have a journal and register viewer. So I can say, show me any document from the ABC company that was generated between such and such a time, which coincidentally, I made one this morning for you guys. So here is my module came from the GL. Here's the daily transaction register. And the reason this one doesn't have a posting date specifically listed is because it's comprised of many. So when you have one that's made of many, so I did one update for general daily transaction register, from the GL that caught all the open ones in the system, so there's 7 or 8 of them, you won't see that. If it's a one-to-one record, meaning it's just one register I updated, it will give you the journal number, the posting date, the batch number, and then when it was created. If it was updated in the system, and again, if you have retained last only, these are only the ones you're going to see. If you don't, you might see some no's in here as the 4th and 5th time they printed it before finalizing it, and then the location it's set to store at. So again, I can just give that a double click, and just like I printed it to paper, here's my register with all my postings. And so you can see there's an AR register, an SO register, a PO register, and an AP register from different dates. May, you know, all the other things like that. So, Teresa, you can't see the screen? How about no? Oh, the report's just a PDF. It's not it should be visible to everyone there. I'll move on, but we can walk through it there. It's literally just a recreation of the physical register you would have printed. It might be displaying to my local desktop versus my shared desktop, but I doubt it. So we can look and filter by any individual module. I'm specifically looking for that purchase order register, and I just want the receipt register. I don't care about anything else. So here's my data receipt register, and that was from January of last year. And again, provided you had the setup, has to be occurring through this date, hit refresh, and your listings will come through. So just like we have a journal and register viewer, we have the same thing for period end reports. We have the same thing for the reports. And again, this is if it was set up when it was created. This will not go back and create any documents if you guys just decide to set it up now. It won't be able to retroactively go create anything. And then we have things like customer viewer. So I can go look for a particular customer. So I want to see the invoices from this and this date, and it would show me anything that was created for my listing of customers. And then I can sort my columns about what order I want them to be in. I can use my magnifying glass to look for a particular customer number within that list, or a particular PO number if I don't know what customer it was from, but I know I did that. It's been a really busy day. Don't judge me, that kind of thing. You can dig in and find the things you've saved. So the idea is, we're not as reliant on the filing away system. We have everything on the server in a recreatable, reprintable PDF that's very easy to use. And we have the same sort of functions for customers and vendors. So for vendors, obviously it would only be either a check we cut them, an order, or a return order request, but same thing. It's stored, we can access it via this viewer, and then we can look for things like deliver all unsent, which would be like how I want to ship anything that's sent to email that was never sent before. All right. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of payroll here, so bear with me if you don't have it. I will be very quick upon this. In payroll, the employee, besides getting an email to them, can actually log in here and say, I want to look at direct stubs. So this would be for people with management abilities. They could look through what they've generated. This will not be accessible to the average user without a very specific permission and role maintenance. But what they can do is come here to employee self-service. They can key in their number, look for the document they're looking for, and then give the social security password if these are different, and then hit view documents, and it'll show them what they have available to them in their history. Oh yeah, they did send me that. Look, it's generated right then and there. I must not have got that email. I'll go look for it. But they'll have the ability to recreate it themselves and only access to the ones that are associated to them. Okay. Now let's talk about the required setups in the rest of the system for all this fun stuff to work. And I just want to show you guys really quick. I'll minimize this. So here's the folder I dictated on my desktop, and then here's the actual register for the same thing I pulled up via the viewer there. So this would be somewhere on your server or on your file server or on your controller desktop or wherever you want to have it, but as long as it's accessible across the network and seen by the Sage server or the person printing it, you should be able to sort of dictate where you go. Now, there are caveats to that for advanced and premium users. You can't do a local this PC C drive. It has to be a UNC pass. So you'd have to set up some folder shares and things like that, but very much so you can do that kind of option. So first and foremost, if we want to email things, we need to go to the library master and say that our company has an email address set up. So I'm picking this demo company. You'll see there's an email tab. I will need to dictate my SMTP server. This might be mail.google.com for you, or mail.gmail, smtp.gmail.com, mail.yahoo. This could be your Exchange server address, your physical IP for the Exchange server address. And then are you using encryption to access this? So if so, it'd be an encrypted port. If you're not going to use encryption, port 25. And again, refer to your IT group for support for this. This would be the same way if you were setting up an email account in Outlook or a web address type thing, and then your username and password. Now, this is the user account that's going to log into the service. You need to make sure, if you want to use the send as alias stuff I briefly made sure everybody was aware of, that this account has the ability in your Exchange server or your Gmail or your Outlook processing to send as an alternate user, so send as an alias address. So that way Cole can send as sales@walpolecpa.com. If not, your mail service will only show up as this particular address, or it may not function at all depending on which access you're using. So just like you'd set up an Exchange account or a link to your phone, etc., this will be required upon your setups, the different changes, and then a username, domain, and password. Okay. For accounts receivable, if we talk about customer maintenance, so not only did I have to set up which forms I can send and who it wants to send as, and which ones are enabled for electronic delivery, I have to do the same within a customer. So I have a customer email address. Depending on your version of Sage, you might see a little paperless button right here. In the more modern version, there's a paperless delivery dropdown. And then I can say very specific things. So the SO invoice can be sent, they can be printed, it can also be emailed. And if I want to email it, I now have these options. Do I use the email address and data entry? So whatever email address is listed in SO or AR invoice data entry, or AR statement printing. Or do I send it to the customer email address? Do I send it to both? If I have a contact code person, and I pick Artie's contact, Artie has a Sage address here. I mean, these happen to be the same, but if this particular contact had another address, this would work as well. And then I can also say if it's to, from, or if it's a blind copy. No, I'm sorry, to a copy or a blind copy. It's always going to be from the setups. And then we also have the, well, internally, I want one too when you send it to these guys, because these are my favorite client, and I want to make sure they're taken care of. And then I don't really need them to know that I'm sending it to myself, so I'll send a blind carbon copy. So it comes to me, but they don't see it coming to me. You have all kinds of setups you can do here. If you fax, you can use WinFax or like an eFax process, and you can actually set those up too. So this is important. If you want to know why it's sending to who, this is your basic setup per customer. Now, we can help with a visual integrator job to update some of these en masse, but otherwise it's set up sort of one by one as you want to process these things. So this is important. What's an invoice data entry, or with the data entry? Also and or the main customer address, particular contact codes, and that is literally what you're seeing here, and then the blind copies or the custom copies, or just additionals. It might be everybody else in the company you want to send to for invoicing for this particular customer. So for the ship to the contact codes, that's your standard primary contact and accounts receivable. So Artie and John both have one, and I can make a new one, and so I can set specific contact codes to be used for all those. So one more time, the paperless function, whether that's the small little paperless button you'll see down low, or whether it's the newer versions with the paperless office delivery, same thing. Everything is unique. So you'll notice I set up SO invoice, but AR invoice is not, so it has to be set up again. What type, who it comes to. I only want you to use the main. I don't care about whatever address is on the invoice. This is who it goes to. And then, me. For accounts receivable, for those that utilize salespersons, one new feature in Sage 100 2019 and Sage 100 2020 is in salesperson maintenance, you can actually dictate a paperless function as well. So if I come to good old Jim, we all love Jim, and I say the paperless function here, I could say Jim gets an AR invoice, an SO invoice, and an order, and then same thing, I can give it to CC or BCC. Just so that anytime any of his customers gets electronically delivered an email with an invoice, etc., he gets a copy too. So this is one way to keep your sales staff in the loop, informed. They can see customer statements about who they need to follow up with on collections to get their commissions, those kind of things. And that's a newer feature in 19 and 20. And again, that's just in salesperson maintenance. You associate the paperless office, and then it's any customer that has that person associated as a salesperson staff. So that's Jim. So if I send one to American Business Furnitures, Jim will get those kind of things as well. Okay, accounts payable. Same thing. We have a vendor. We have a paperless button, one way or another, and then same thing. Again, just check, purchase order, or return order. And that's as far as I'll go into that, but all the same process. Obviously, we don't have salespersons here, so nothing to worry about there, but that's your setup for AP is identical to AR. All right, I will touch briefly on payroll, and then I'll jump into actually sending stuff so you guys can see the difference between how to print the PDF, how to resend, all that kind of stuff. So in an employee, they need to have an email address, and in the paperless function, same kind of thing. Do they print it? Do they get it emailed? Their password is determined by my setup, and if I have to resend them the password, if it was auto-generated or if it's their social security and I don't want to look it up, I could say email password right here, and it'll send it over to the associated email on file. Hey, this is your password for your Stage 100 direct deposit stubs when you do this. So that's the other side of this. The employee has to have it set up here in employee maintenance. You can set up how it's delivered, and then the basic setups we saw. Okay, now on to the important thing I'm sure everybody wants to know is how the heck do we actually send these things? Okay, so you can set things to send up during registers when you print an email. Or you can send things out one at a time. I'm going to talk about sales order for brevity, but this applies to accounts receivable invoices. This is statement printing. This is printing reports. Anything but registers, essentially. Registers, if set up, will automatically trigger. If I want to do a report for certain things, I need to look for certain dropdowns. So if I come to invoice printing, so again, standard Sage questions. Invoice printing is my global selection of anything that's either been printed or not. So has it been printed or not? And that's just a check mark flag on the invoice if it's open. Versus quick printing from within an invoice screen will dictate the invoice number for you automatically. This is the range. So I can say all or none of things that haven't been printed or haven't been updated and finalized, that sort of thing. So I'm going to say everything, whether it's been printed or not before. And then you'll notice I now have a paperless office output because I have this enabled in the system. So do I print it? Do I just email it? Do I print it for the print option? Do I print and deliver it electronically, or do I print or deliver it and then again print PDF all? So if you have Paperless Office newly enabled and you're wondering why you're not creating any of these PDF documents, it's because you have it set to print. Really, your default should be print PDF all or PDF all. And then when you print these options, it'll just generate those files in the appropriate location. Once you print it once, it will remember your selection setting the last time for that workstation and that computer. So you should only ever have to set that up once. Time to time from upgrades, people forget to change this because we've just installed a new workstation because we had to remove the old to put the new one on. And, oh, hey, none of my stuff is being stored, and it's just literally because it's still left at print all. Okay, so the difference between print all and electronically deliver is print in PDF just like I would select and email anybody that has an email address, versus or would be print and PDF unless they have an email, then just email it to them. And then it's just a matter of selecting this. So now you can see I've got my options. I would hit print, and this would email out to all the customers, and you will see printing pages blank of blank and sending emails 25 of 25, 101, 202, including a little error message that'll tell you when something is successfully sent for whatever reason it may be. So this is the key. So I could say I only want to send out this invoice number, and again, they have to be an open invoice for invoice printing. Only email it. So I'm going to say electronic delivery only, and then I would just hit print, even though I'm emailing, and that process would trigger that way. All right. So if I want to come into my invoice data entry, so in sales order, as we do these things, we might be printing something and say, let's go to print the sales orders. So this will automatically take us to invoice printing. And then the idea is by just going through here, I can now do the whole run of invoices I have for either the particular batch I'm in, or in this case, when I don't have batch services enabled, it's every invoice that's an open entry. And print just like I demonstrated, and away you go. So it's going to print it. Or if they have an email, it's going to email them to me, and it'll tell me any errors in regards to how many were delivered versus not. For printing things from history or sending one-offs, I have, for instance, sales orders. This is another common point of confusion. I might be doing quotes for an order, my favorite PO number, 12345. Here's your, it's going to cost you $34. So I can say print. Yes, I would. And again, this is sales order printing. So this is the wide range of everything because I just hit the print icon, I did the print icon. So I'd have to select my criteria, select my form, because again, I may have a quote form, an order form, one form, 100 forms to choose from. What I have selected is the form code of the PDF it's going to generate. So it will behave just like printing normally from Crystal. Whatever I select is the view and format it's going to take. And then I'd select my document to print there. So if I want to send a one-off of my quote, I hit print the order from here, and you'll notice there's no selection. And the same thing, I still need to select the appropriate form code I would want, and then electronic delivery or print and electronically deliver, and print and or electronically deliver, and then print the function to trigger it that way. That's the important thing. So if you can think of Paperless Office as the extension of normal Sage printing, that's what you're going to want to do when you select your forms. And if I'm doing a quick print versus a global print, I don't want to think I'm emailing one person when I've just emailed everyone. And again, even if I did the bulk email, it would be the appropriate email per record per customer or vendor in which case. But you'd be sending them all out again. So if somebody already printed it or somebody already emailed it manually and hadn't updated the system and you said print everything, including stuff that already been printed, they'd get another one and another copy. So just like normal Sage, it's up to you to manage these things. Some clients like to do sales order printing. They've done all their work for the day and entered it. They print or PDF and or electronically deliver, and they send it to everybody. And then the next time when I print these things, it'll only be the selection of what's going to be open for me because everything else will be marked as already done. And this isn't necessarily limited to Paperless, but as an example, this order's been printed. There are these check boxes here, and now it hasn't been printed because I've checked the box again, print the order again. I uncheck it, and they won't print no matter what, unless I say pick things have already printed. So purchase order, very much the same way. I've entered a nice PO for a vendor. I want to send this out to my vendor. And then same thing, now I have my option to deliver it to him specifically. And again, form code matters. And then I can say things in the line message like, here's the PO, please confirm via receipt, that kind of thing. So the printing in Sage is mirrored into the Paperless function. It's just a matter of where are we storing it, what are we storing, how often, and then for electronic delivery, it requires a little bit of setup for fine-tuning who it goes to and how it goes out, i.e. which account it's technically behaving at, and then which access point you need to give it to them from. That we send as other things. So purchase orders, checks, it's the same thing in AP check printing. We would set up the process to go, and then when I print my check electronic payment, I have my same options. So just like I would print a check, I would do both. And if it was me, if I was cutting a physical, or if I print a stock and then send them a copy of that and then actually send them a wire transfer, we've got all kinds of clients who do it in a bit of a different way, but the process remains the same. If you focus on treating it as the Sage 100 printing, you're going to be just fine because you'll understand form selection, delivery options, record selection when it comes to invoice and SO printing, things like that. But Sage will take care of the rest. Sage will send the email, things like that. If I need to go to a customer and do something like invoice history inquiry, so say I'm going to go dig something up, hey, you never sent me that. The good news is I can go back to something from forever ago, the longest one I have, go to print it, and then now I can even resend this one-off from 2 years ago because I can recreate the file in this form. When it comes to forms, luckily it's self-generated, so it's not necessarily storing a PDF unless it sends it. I can go back and reprint and send these things from back after I enable this. That's going to be the basics of this. So customer setup is important about the paperless function. Same thing with vendors. Payroll is an option. And then, again, storage is the initial setup of our defined file locations across the servers. But what this is going to enable you to is not only to communicate quickly and efficiently for your customers and vendors and employees, no more passing paper around, both from an environmental and a cost point. And in the COVID time, no handling folders and licking stamps and things like that. Then if you combine that with, electronic payments via ACH or credit cards or the new e-invoicing in 2020 for your clients and customers to pay, we can all touch a lot less things that have been touched by other people. Melinda, I think that's a kind of a good introduction and a stopping point. If anybody has a couple of questions, I'll be happy to answer anything.
So if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask it in the chat. I don't see any questions other than what Teresa wrote earlier thus far.
But this is, so this function is available for all Sage 100 from 2013 later. So this is, there's no cost, there's nothing to sign up for. It's just a matter of setting it up and doing it correctly. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of it.
All right, well, let's see. Teresa asked, if a customer wants a receipt for their credit card or cash payments, how do we do that?
So depending on your processing, so if you've got processing done in Sage, there are some reports you can send, and Walpole can help modify that. But if you're processing through Paya on the desktop will automatically send them a receipt. If you want them to see an invoice form with maybe the last 4 digits of the card they used to pay for it, you'd simply modify an invoice form and then send them the invoice in that regard. We have clients to do that because they use an outside processor from a different website we import to, but we record those records back and forth. Yeah, as long as the data is in Sage and accessible, you can customize your forms, whether that's the invoice, sales order, purchase order, whatever have you, and then that's the information that generates on that form, and that's the form you're actually emailing them. So again, the form selection on your choice is very important. If you select the standard sales order that doesn't have anything you want or shows all the pricing when you really just wanted to send them a quote for something else, you need to be diligent just like you would for printing something. I don't want to print the wrong form and then wonder why it doesn't look the same as I wanted it, that kind of thing.
Cool. Thank you so much for the information today. And thank you, everyone, for attending our Paperless Office webinar. This concludes the training session for today. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe, wash your hands, and stay at home. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.